episode of the Habibis, three game developers drinking good Arab tea. I am your host for this week, Osama Dorias.
And I am Fawzi Masmar.
How are you doing, Yafozi?
I'm all right, thanks. I liked your hesitation before three
Yeah,
game
yeah. I was
developers.
like, not Arab game developers, it's game developers. The tea is Arab.
This time we're gonna get it right. That was the plan.
Yeah, exactly. We're missing Rami again this time. He's probably in an
Yeah,
airplane somewhere. Either he's flying it or someone's flying him, one or the other.
that's good. That's good. He's
Or maybe in a
traveling again.
destiny raid. Yep.
Rami is back in his natural habitat in the air.
Pretty much. He has to open up his site again. What was it called? Where in the world is Rami or something like that?
It's Rami in the Netherlands, I think.
Oh yeah. And it's like no 99% of the time.
It was yeah. He
Yeah.
was what is it like? Traveling 300 days of the year usually.
Yeah, that's incredible. Incredible. I bet you he's in the 1% of the world of people who travel. It has to be.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
kind of a surprise that people in airports don't recognize him, uh, and he still gets randomly checked. Still, like he should
Oh no.
should be part of the family in most
Ex-
airports by now.
Exactly. They should just give him a uniform.
Yeah,
Whatever it is.
exactly. He does have a uniform. It's a leather jacket that he
That's
wears it
true.
regardless of the season.
That's true. And aviator glasses. Cool.
How you been, Osama?
I've been great. I did a thing, a big thing, a huge
Oh,
thing.
a
Yeah,
huge thing.
a huge thing.
Don't tell me.
What?
Don't tell me. You finished Elden Ring.
I finished Elden Ring.
Oh my God, you got the claim to fame. You
Yes.
were saying you've never finished a Souls game before.
I don't think I've ever beaten more than one boss in a Souls game before. So actually, I'm sure I haven't. The only Souls game that I've beaten a legitimate boss was Demon Souls. I beat the
Wow,
first boss and I got stuck on the second, and that's it. This is the game that made me break that streak. Um,
that's amazing, man.
yeah, I'm so like I feel so happy and fulfilled. You know what's the first thing I did when I beat the game?
Hmm.
I started New Game
Yeah.
Plus, like
Oh, wow.
yeah, instantly.
It
Like
really got its hooks on you.
yeah, I don't think I'm gonna finish it again. Actually, I already put it aside. But like when I started New Game Plus, I was more curious. That was when the game designer in me kicked in. I wanted to
Yeah,
see how hard New Game Plus is, what you carry over with you. Like it was more like for studying it. I wanted to see what their New Game Plus offered, um,
yeah,
and it was very interesting. For me, my experience, New Game Plus is easy mode. Like I
yeah.
legitimately beeline to the first like five or six bosses that I could remember, one after the other, and defeated them all on my first try. In most cases,
Wow,
without taking a single hit, because I remembered their patterns.
nice.
Yeah,
The muscle memory is like working.
yes, exactly. But like, it's not just that I got better because like I did get better. I didn't get hit, but also the stats that you carry over with you it makes them trivial. Like one of the bosses normally has two phases, right?
Yeah.
Not complete phases. Not a health bar comes back and it's a different boss phase, but more like something happens in between, right? Um,
Hmm.
I killed that boss without seeing its second phase because I was just doing so much damage. So I dropped the
Wow,
boss to the ground and hit, and that's it. The second phase just never happened.
wow.
Yeah,
It's cool.
uh,
It's cool that you can still do that. That it's not scripted to that level.
yeah, I mean, I think most bosses are, but this one particular one, which I'm not going to say for spoiler reasons,
Yeah.
wasn't. And I was like, oh, it doesn't get back up. If I keep hitting it, I guess I'll keep hitting it, and it was over. And the only reason I stopped playing New Game because I was just going on a rampage, like one boss and the
Hmm.
next and the next, is I got to a point where I'm like, wait, I don't remember what to do next. I'm like, I guess I'll stop now. I didn't want to go like look for a guide or wander around because that wasn't like why I was playing it. But
Yeah.
you want to play easy mode? There is an easy mode. All you have to do is beat the
Let's
game.
finish the game. Spend a couple 100 hours, finish the game,
Exactly.
then
But
start all over again.
just it just goes to show that the game was still fun on easy mode. I still had
Wow.
a good time. Just saying.
I I heard from a lot of people that finished it that once they started doing the new game plus, they still discovered new things.
Yeah, I did too. Right away.
Yeah.
Like
Right
it didn't
away.
even take me long. I was like at one point I'm like, I think this is the way to this place. And I went in that direction and I just discovered a new cave I had never seen before. And like
Wow.
with a new boss at the end of it that I had never seen before. I'm like, what the how is this possible? There was also an area where just on the side where I looked down and I'm like, I don't think I've been there. But I'm pretty sure I looked down here before. I just never found a way down there. Let me try to find a way now that I don't have to be scared of mobs as much as before. And I just like circled around. And yep, there was like a scary like dragon or something that was like that I noped away from in the path to that new area. Now I just like killed the dragon, went down there and I found a whole village of um one particular type of NPC that I had missed completely the first time around. I didn't know that it existed.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Because it's one of the enemy NPCs that you only see usually as enemies. But in this village, they're all friendly and you get to talk to them. And I'm like, what is this? This is like special content, like completely missable. And I had missed it completely. So I'm sure if I kept playing, that'll keep happening. It's just the game is massive, massive, massive. So yeah, what I that's why I said I put it down for now. I didn't say I stopped it. I might actually go back and keep playing it if the urge comes back. What's
That's
interesting is
crazy.
I picked up Horizon again because
Ah,
if you remember, I had played Horizon. I got about a
yes.
quarter of the way through, and then Elden Ring got its hooks in me, and I couldn't go back to it. I picked
Yeah.
it up again, and in the beginning, there was a little bit of struggle because it's so different, and that's normal.
Mm.
That happens every time you switch games that are very different to me, at least. Um, I kept pressing the wrong buttons, and like I had to like remember what the story was and where I was, that kind of thing. But once I got over that, I beat another quarter of it, so I'm about halfway through the game.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm really liking it. It's a really good game, and I did the thing that I try not to do, but I can't help, where I'm comparing the two most recent games that I played, even though they're very
Hmm.
different, and it's really not fair to either of them to do that. But you can't help it, right? You just fresh
Yeah.
off of one that you spent a lot of time in, and now you're fully immersed in the second one. And the way, like the most notable thing that I took away from it, because there are many differences. They're not a similar type of game, really, other than being open world and maybe RPG, like the loose definition of what RPG is. There's not that much in common, and yet I like the biggest thing that I noticed is the design of the open world, where even though that's not really the case in Horizon, what it feels like it's a series of interconnected tunnels, like interconnected corridors,
Hmm.
because it's like path with trees on the side. It's not the case because you could, in many cases, like run through the trees and cross over to another path, right? But
Yeah.
it's constant streams of water with bridges across them or mountains that you have to scale. Like there are, it feels more like a tapestry of routes that you can take. And you have a very good idea of which one is the one that you need to take to go to your objectives, while Elden Ring is more of the Breath of the Wild like vision of open world, where it's like many areas that are flat, and then there are parts that are not flat that separates them from other flat areas, and you're free to go pretty much wherever you want. And this is not a value statement of this is better and this is worse, but that dramatic difference between the two like philosophies of open world is the thing that took me the most to get used to when I switched from one to the other and then back again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd imagine that I would have the same. It's kind of, like difficult when you go from almost complete, like in an odd way, what you're describing kind of sounds how I felt because something similar happened in 2017 when I dropped off the original Horizon to
Mm,
play Skyward Sword.
hmm.
No, not Skyward Sword, sorry, Breath of the Wild. What am I saying?
Yes, yes.
To play Breath of the Wild. And then, like, after I spent 120 hours or something like that in Breath of the Wild,
Hmm.
like one of my favorite games ever.
Me too.
Then I came back to Horizon again, and I got the same feeling. It felt
Yeah,
like a lot of interconnected tunnels.
yeah,
Like it's kind of difficult not to feel that when like there was a game in which like any mountain here you can climb
yeah.
literally.
Yep.
and you could probably find something even on the top of it. Um, then you go back to a different kind of game. Like it's nothing against any of the games. It's just like how they're designed. The
Hmm.
other games that it's designed to guide you towards a very specific path.
Hmm.
But I guess
Very.
at this point, I have a preference. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like
Yes.
as a player, I I enjoy the more guided sequential design experience, but I enjoy more the more systematic experience in which, like, here's the game systems. The more I understand them, the more I get to know the game better, and the more I interact with it better.
I,
And understanding them and experimenting, and I have freedom of choice and
mhm,
tackling different issues in many ways and all of that. I think that's, like, my preferred type of game to play.
mhm. This is the funny thing is I think generally I agree with you. Like I spent a ridiculous amount of hours in Breath of the Wild. I think I clocked in at 200 hours because I beat it, and then I started in
Mm.
master mode, the hard mode, and I beat it again. Um,
Yeah.
and Elden Ring, I'm on my way to doing that possibly. Like I definitely spent like 100 and whatever 30 hours, 40 hours on the first playthrough, and maybe another 10 on the second so far. I didn't replay Horizon the first one, and this one I like. I'm enjoying it. I expect, unless something happens, I expect that I'm going to finish it. It's not that like the open world isn't my favorite part of it. Right, I like other things about it
Mm.
a lot more. But this is if you take the Arkham series, my favorite Arkham game is Arkham Asylum, which is actually the more
Yeah,
guided one.
that's
and
true.
and the other ones I like a lot, like Arkham City, for example. But I felt that the openness of it didn't add to what the game was like, or what I was
Mm.
looking for in the game. So I don't think it's a one-to-one for me. In some cases, I do prefer a more guided approach, and for me, for Batman specifically, because Arkham Asylum was a Metroidvania. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It was a small area. You become intimate with it, and then you come back to it, and it changes based on whatever you learned or whatever you gained.
Hmm.
While when they switched it to Arkham City, it felt like they took that same formula, broke it up in little pieces, put it in an open world, and spread it across where you had to now navigate between areas to get there. And
Hmm.
there were other things that you could discover, other like there were other things that happened in the open world, but that main gameplay that I was looking for out of that game, it didn't fit the open world as much. Not bad. Like I'm being critical here, but I'm not saying it's a bad thing that they did this.
Hmm.
I'm talking about personal preference. My personal preference
Yeah.
is, like I prefer the smaller arenas for the type of gameplay
Yeah.
that it gave. So I don't think it's a one to one, or rather, I think there are more things to keep into consideration, because Arkham City was more or less similar in its openness. It wasn't a series of corridors because you could just go over everything and just like that was the preferred method of travel, was just to go over
Uh,
the entire city and just fly around, right?
that's traversal between the different sections of the game. However, once a mission is started, it is still a very guided experience.
True.
You know what I mean? So, like, I think, well, what I meant to say is not necessarily adding an open world or not. Like, there
Hmm.
could be not an open world at all, but the approach to the game itself is open. So, like, for example, the Phantom Pain is an open world game,
Yeah.
but how you approach the mission is completely open.
Yeah.
So there's multiple ways to finish the mission because the all the objectives of the mission, they are in motion at the same time as when the mission started. So you can bypass three sub objectives and go directly to the end objective, and you can complete it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're playing a game like Arkham City or GTA, you have
Hmm.
to go through the sequence of events to get to the
Exactly.
conclusion of the mission. And that is the distinction that I was making in what I like. It's not necessarily an open world at all.
I see
It's
what you
that
mean.
the approach to problem solving is kind of like there's the two ways. There's a multiple systems, and then you can get creative in mixing these systems
Hmm.
into facing the problem that the designer is putting in front of you.
Hmm.
Or there is a set of steps that you need to take, and you need to follow the steps that the designer has set in front of you
Yes.
to get to the conclusion of that mission.
Yeah. Well, when you put it
And
that way, then I 100% agree with you. My preference is the more open systems. I didn't catch the system part. I missed
mm,
what your thesis was.
yeah, yeah, it's not necessarily the open world, because an open world is a way of representing a game world. But like
Yeah.
this War of Mine is not an open world in a standard definition of an open world,
Hmm.
but it's still open systematically for you to face the issues that your or problems that your character is facing in any way you want.
Hmm.
You
Absolutely.
just like you just use the systems in the way that the game provides with you, and then you can solve the solutions or not solve the solutions. Like
Hmm.
this War of Mine even takes it a step further in terms of like the narrative is also told by your own actions.
Yep.
So in some way, there's a bit of a system going into the story that you will have as a player, and that makes it even more interesting for me.
Yeah. Just
So
emergent storytelling all the way down.
exactly, it's emergent storytelling done through game mechanics, which I think is really captivating. So it's
Absolutely.
And so that said, Arkham Asylum is a very good example of a game that's completely guided, like Metal Gear
Hmm.
Solid. The first one is a completely linear experience if you think about it, and it's
Absolutely.
guided step by step as designed. So those are also some of my favorite games.
Yeah. But you're right.
So
When you take
it's a
that
matter of
man,
preference. So like modern day design, like as I'm how to say it, as I played games more and my taste has kind of like gotten different over time, I now prefer the more systematic approach to gaming rather than the linear guided uh, method and design.
that's true. Absolutely. No, I agree. I lean that way as well. And I think that's one of the things that really attracted me to Elden Ring. It's that openness that, like you, I really like that it has missable content. Can I just say that part?
Yeah, yeah,
That's one of my favorite things is just like I when it comes to content, I love it. Missable content, I think, is one of the things that people used to use as a curse word within development. Like, oh, don't do that, that's missable. But I think it has so much value when you do encounter these little things, even if they're little things. You do encounter them, and you're not like, and you know that maybe someone else missed it. It feels more valuable to you, and then learning about them later, that's valuable as well, right? Oh wow, that was a
yeah,
thing. Like, no, you're not disappointed about what you don't know. You can't be, but you could be like, impressed or happy about what you do discover. So missable content I love. Missable systems, not so much a fan of, like, especially if they're big core systems, and that happened to me a couple of times. So I think that
yeah,
would be my main criticism of the game, is that I actually played it in my from my perspective hard mode, because I didn't know about certain core systems that would have made it easier. But like
including the game's tutorial, which I
yes,
read that they patched.
yeah, they did, and I'm so happy that they patched it, and that should have been the default to begin with.
Yeah,
Or rather, I still think that the level should have been designed in like inversely, like fall to skip the tutorial and go forward to go through the tutorial. I think would have been the more natural way. But still, it's fine. I
yeah,
managed without it. I learned to dodge eventually and to parry eventually by pressing all the buttons.
yeah. I mean, it's not ideal for sure, but
No,
like, yeah, unfortunately, there are many great games that don't spend a lot of time explaining this. Onboarding in video games is something I think we can do better
yeah,
in
it's true.
many ways. But like also like our discussion is making me thinking that I'm gonna definitely leave a lot more space between Elden Ring and me going back to Horizon, because I definitely want to go back to Horizon, but I want to play a couple of games in between to make sure that I have that difference in mindset.
I think that's
Otherwise,
important. Yeah, because I
otherwise
did
that
struggle.
it would
Yeah,
be difficult.
yeah, I did struggle. I struggled a little bit at the beginning, but that happens when games are somewhat similar but not similar enough. Like you have your user model is adjusted, and it's hard to adjust it again. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But yeah, maybe some drastically different games in between in some time will allow you to just reset that user model and go in fresh. Yeah.
yeah,
Uh, do you,
agreed.
so did you play anything else? Because you've been playing
Uh,
Elden Ring, I assume.
Yeah, so I was on the road for a long time, and like I said, I couldn't have access to my PS5. I'm only back to Stockholm for. I still have another trip I need to do before I come back and like settle in Stockholm for a while. So I was playing another game in the meantime before I
Hmm.
go back to my PS5. I've been playing a game called Weird West.
I downloaded that and I really wanted to try it. It
Ah,
looks
that's
really
cool.
good.
Cool. So maybe some like telling you my experience about it will encourage you to check it out.
Please.
It's it's by a studio called Wolfeye Studio, which, as far as I know, it's a bunch of ex developers from Arcane
Oh,
in Lyon, which is very incidental because I was in Lyon a couple of weeks ago.
huh.
Um, so I think it's a medium sized studio, around 20-ish people. One of them, like, I think most of them are ex Arcane peeps who worked on a bunch of things, like long time Arcane people, Dishonored folk, and stuff like that. And then
Mhm.
they went indie basically, and they worked on this game. Weird West on its own. I don't know if you know. It's the title is based on a genre that
Yeah,
is called Weird West,
yeah. From
Weird
comic books
Westerns.
from a long time ago.
Oh, that is the part I didn't know. I knew the genre Weird Westerns, which is basically a mix of sci-fi Western, fantasy Western, and horror Western, like all these alternate Westerns. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Kind of mixed, mishmashed together, and they form this genre called Weird West.
Yeah, there was literally a comic book called Weird Western Tales, like from the golden era, like from a long. I think it was just from the silver era of comic books, actually.
Oh yeah.
So I'm not sure if that's the source, but that's where I know. Like there's the famous most famous character from it is Jonah Hex.
Hmm.
So if you've heard of any of the characters, it's probably that one. If you haven't, you should look into it. It was a very cool genre, and like again, I'm not sure if it originated from comics, but that's where I first heard of it. I love it.
So
I
it's
love when things mix these
DC
things up.
basically, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think it was DC.
Hmm.
Yeah, Jonah Hex
Hmm.
is DC. Yeah, so it's definitely DC.
Yeah. Very cool. So yeah, so the title caught my attention, so I wanted to check it out. And then I was like, "Who made this game?" I was like, "Oh yeah, it's those guys up in Lyon," and I think it's published by Devolver Digital. It just came out last day of March, if I March April. So it just came out recently.
Hmm.
What the game is basically it's a role playing game from an isometric perspective. Immediately once I started playing it, it gave me a little bit of Desperados vibe. I don't know if
Hmm.
you played these games, but Desperado 3 I really enjoyed. Also similar to the Commandos games back in the day,
Yeah.
in
Okay.
which, like, for a lot of areas, like, you need to kind of infiltrate into a castle, an outpost, something,
Hmm.
and there's enemies on patrol in which you need to retrieve something, talk to someone, or something like this. Like, you need to perform the objective of the mission,
Hmm.
and then, like, you can either do it stealthily or go out gun blazing and deal with the consequences, so to say.
Hmm.
So there is an element of action to it. So, like, think of, like, what if Commandos was an RPG?
Hmm.
You kind of get this interesting mixture. So it's
I'm super
isometric
excited to
point
try
of
it now.
view. You walk around kind of like, Divinity style. You talk to
Hmm.
characters, you collect items, and all of that stuff.
Hmm.
And once you start combat or battle, you can engage by using the guns and weapons you would use, or try to distract enemies, or use props in the scene, similar as you would with a Commandos or a Desperados game.
I'm super excited because I love like I played Divinity, I love Divinity, I played Commandos, love Commandos, played
Yeah,
you remember the original Fallouts that were like isometric and
yeah,
turn
yeah,
based?
exactly. Fallout
Yeah,
1 and 2. Yeah,
1 and 2. Yeah, I love those games. So like it's definitely my cup of tea. And I
yeah.
love the theme too. So it's just nothing stopped me from playing it other than Elden Ring and then Horizon. So it's
Yeah,
probably next on my list.
the themes is good. Like, it's interesting. I don't think I played a game in that setting before, like a setting of Weird West.
Hmm.
But like I said, it's hard to kind of shake the Desperados feel, because it has a lot of that vibe, the cowboy vibe, from this perspective and this type of gameplay.
Yeah.
But there's multiple characters that you roll. Apparently, I did not know that. Like, the characters I have, I think they're all bounty hunters, nonetheless. So you get to, collect bounties, do the missions, explore the game story, buy items, sell items, accumulate wealth, and, like, level up your character, get more abilities, get better weapons, level up your weapons, the whole shebang. There's an interesting mechanic I want to note, is that things take time.
Hmm.
So, like, if you want to move from one part of the world to the other, this will take some time. If you want to move from one map to the other, it will tell you this will take 17 hours on foot, or like, 2 days on a horse, or something like that.
Hmm.
And you get some missions that says this mission, or like, there's this guy, they'll kill this guy in 5 days.
Oh,
And then you kind of need to respond to this mission in that regard. So it's there's a time pressure element
so
that
you have
is added. So
choices
like
to make. You can't do everything.
bounties expire. The story mission has consequence if you don't respond to it in time, and if you like decide to not buy a horse early on, you lose a lot of time by going between towns on foot.
Hmm.
You get encounters that you can't escape if you're on foot, where you can might escape them if you're on horse. So there's an element of time management
Hmm.
that you have to balance, as well as the game itself.
That's very interesting.
And the shooting itself is very similar to twin stick shooters. So if Rami if Rami was here, probably appreciate this type of gameplay.
Yeah.
So uh,
I love twin
because
stick shooters too. That's pretty cool. How do they do that
I'm
with turn based? That's interesting.
it's not turn based.
Oh, it's not turn based. Okay, okay,
That's what I'm
okay.
saying. So like
Oh,
like imagine an RPG with an action based gameplay that
wow. I
is more
missed
twin
that
stick shooter.
completely. That's
Yeah.
incredible. That's just my cup of tea. I'm
So
super
think
excited to play
so
that.
like commandos or desperados, they're not
Yeah,
turn
you're
based.
right. You're right. I don't know
Yeah.
why. Like in my, I remembered them being turn based. Like it's, I don't know, I had a brain fart, I guess. But like you mentioned that, I'm like, yeah, I've played those, but like I remember
Maybe
them
some
being
of
like,
them
oh,
do.
I
Maybe some
don't
of
know,
them do. But yeah, then
maybe,
think of it more like a twin stick actiony Fallout 2. I think it's probably
yeah.
the best way to think about it.
Wow. Okay,
Uh,
I'm super excited.
it's pretty interesting. But like there will be times of frustration in the game, and I think it's worth mentioning just because I think design-wise it's interesting to discuss. Because a lot of the elements of like going through the world is stealth,
Hmm.
and in stealth there's a frustration that very few games can balance. I'm not sure. So I'm not sure if there's a design issue that has a fix, so to say. But
Hmm.
everything is nice and dandy until you get discovered.
Hmm.
And once you get discovered, things spiral out of control, right?
Yeah.
So like you're like you're being a badass. You collect you like you're going behind the enemy, choking them, hiding them in the bushes, doing everything so smoothly. Nobody's detecting you. You're feeling great. Then you do one wrong move, you get spotted, and then everybody starts shooting at you. You start running around shooting like crazy.
Hmm.
Alarms set. There's more people. You get overwhelmed, and then you either escape or you reload
Hmm.
and try again, so to say. So like there's the almost the 0 to 1 state of stealth games. You're either like hidden until you're not, and then like it's chaos.
Hmm.
That is really difficult to deal with, like that kind of frustration of like trying over and over again to remain detected, or just go like screw it, I'm gonna start shooting everybody, and then you start shooting.
Yeah.
So
That's.
there is that element of that in which like you have to load a lot.
I
Like
see.
I'm constantly quick saving, reload, quick save, reload,
Yeah.
quick save, reload. Every time I do something of worth,
Hmm.
I'm saving. In this game, you can also recruit companions,
Hmm.
and these companions can permanently die.
Okay.
So if you screw up, or you haven't saved close enough, or if you got the quick save for whatever reason, and then a shootout happens, and for better or worse, you lost one of the characters, that's it, they're gone.
And are these
The game,
like generic characters that are generated that you'll just find someone else who's similar and you just like the way their stats are rolled? Or are these like crafted story characters that if you lose them, you're missing out part of the
there's a
storytelling
bit of
for it?
both. There's a bit of
Oh,
both. I think like these characters have a bit of flavor to them, but they're all made in a way so that if they die, you can find someone else. And the
okay.
game actually does a good job of telling you like, if you lose one of your comrades, no worries, you can always get another one.
Hmm.
So it's not a big deal. But if you're the type of player that is like me, then losing losing one of your comrades is not an option.
And it's a RPG, so they also level up. Losing it, there is a negative side to losing them because you're gonna have to build someone else up from scratch. Like
Yeah,
the that's what I'm assuming, right?
I think so. I haven't lost one yet, so I'm
Uh,
not sure.
because I guess it's
Uh,
like the XCOM games, which I absolutely love
yeah,
the new XCOM games, and I really like the Gears Tactics one that came out as well. That is similar, where I really didn't want to lose anyone in my party, but I
yeah,
like the way I play is I if it happens, it happens. I allow it to happen, and it's
yeah.
like I move forward with it. That way, it stings. I remember that sting, and I'm much more careful when I approach the game going forward. But then I
Yeah.
get really angry when it feel like I didn't have enough knowledge to prevent it. Like there was an ambush. I didn't know if it would come, like that it was going to happen. Didn't have enough information. I was being safe, and one of my people died anyway. It's kind
Mhm.
of part. It becomes part of the game, like you said, emergent stories that just come up from the systems that are in play. But like it makes me feel real feelings, and that's one of the reasons when I play those games is I let it happen, right? And I
Mhm.
say that with a huge asterisk. There have been the odd time where I'm like, nope, not him. I want him to survive. I'm rolling back. I'm reloading. But in general, I just like play it out. The problem with those games is like that's a negative feedback loop if you allow that to happen because the more people die, the
Mhm.
new people that are come are going to be weaker in general because you have to level them up. Which means your next mission that you bring the weaker people on that you're leveling up, the chances of someone dying is higher because you have the less power and you need to level them up to get them to the point where they were before, so you don't have the option of only sticking to your strongest people, right?
Mhm.
So like it's interesting the way they set that up where the optimal way to play is to reload forever. There's no advantage in playing it out uh the way it is, you know what I mean? I'd be
Yeah.
interested to see if there's a game that actually did not the opposite but like that evened it out a bit. That could
Yeah,
be interesting.
that is like an interesting thing to think about. But yeah, for the time being, I'm reloading a bit. The other thing I found like maybe me using the controller, perhaps it plays differently on PC because
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to play these kinds of twin stick, which is I know it's ironic, it's twin stick, but I'd rather play them on PC. Maybe I played a lot of Diablo growing up,
Mm.
but the twin stick shooting, I had a hard time getting the precision that I want.
Yeah, I see.
Uh, so it was a bit tricky. Like the circular movement is almost too fast for me to be able to grab the enemy. It's too sensitive to my touch. I haven't fooled around with the settings, so maybe there's something to balance that. But if I like twist the right stick a little bit, it goes like almost 180.
Hmm.
So I found that a little bit tricky to like it was it was it wasn't comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
The shooting, let's just say.
Mm-hmm. I'm eager to give it a try and see if
Yeah.
I feel the same thing.
And the last
Um,
thing you can kind of feel that it's a small team working on this game. I encountered a bunch of like gameplay bugs. Like
mhm,
there were times when like I get to a place where a quest is supposed to trigger, but it doesn't.
mhm. That's not
Or
good.
yeah,
It can't
so
be
like
up to
that.
small teams. They have to pick their battles of what they fix, but
Yeah,
it's still
I,
sad.
I reloaded. I reloaded, and then I went back again, and it started normally. So it in 2 sessions it happened enough for it to be noticeable, but at the same time small teams, you got to pick what you're going to fix.
Exactly.
So and the game just came out, so I imagine that they're fixing all of this
They can
stuff and
patch
it's,
it.
it's
Yeah.
coming out soon. So I wouldn't be too concerned about these things, but they were noticeable in my playthrough. But that's it. Like the game's good, it's interesting, it's different, and I like the theme a lot. Like I would like to see more of the theme. I have some quips with the visual art style. Not that it's bad or anything, but in some areas it was really hard to see stuff.
Mm. Mhm,
Yeah, I think there's some work there on the visual style,
mhm.
but yeah, uh,
Overall, you recommend it.
generally, definitely worth checking out. Definitely a good game.
Excited for it. That's going to be my next one.
Yeah, would love to hear your take on it when you get to play
I'm looking forward to it. It sounds like my cup of tea.
it.
Um, I've watched a thing that I can
ah,
talk about. I
cool.
watched a new Batman movie,
Oh, I watched that
The
too.
Batman. Yeah, you
I,
did. Okay.
I did. I did. What
Yeah.
an interesting movie.
Yeah. It's I don't know if it's what I expected or what I didn't expect, to be honest. I can't remember what my expectations were. I guess I was expecting dark and grim, and I got that. And the rest
You
the
definitely get that.
yes. But the my I won't say my fear, but my concern,
Yeah.
I would say, is that I was worried that the message that the movie, before watching it, that the message the movie was going to put out is that um movies are better than comics, like that we're not going to, like, we're going to do it differently, we're not going to like pay
Mm,
tribute to the tones of comics or the stories of comics. That's what I'm always worried about when TV shows or movies go dark and grim when they're based on a comic book, that they're
yeah.
not going to respect the sub the source material. But that wasn't the case, and like, I want to say that people who think that, to be dark and grim doesn't respect comics, is they haven't read enough comics. There's plenty of comics that are, especially Batman comics, but not exclusively, that are really dark and grim and comics at the same time. So, but like, I
Yeah.
still get that feeling from a lot of movies that are like, oh, take us seriously, we're gonna forget that we're based on a comic book, that kind of tone,
Mm,
you know what I mean? And
yeah.
that wasn't the case. This was done so well. Like, from my point of view, it felt
Hmm.
like a really good comic book movie. Like, what would Batman feel like if it respected the source material and leaned on the parts that were like well suited for a movie. So I actually enjoyed it a lot. I don't know if you have anything to say about it, but I have tons to say about it.
Well,
I'll
me
keep
too.
it limited, of course, but
I have a bunch as well. So I like you. I like the general tone of the movie quite a bit.
yeah,
I like the visual themes of it. I liked Robert
yeah,
Pattinson. Is that his name?
Pattinson, yeah,
Pattinson. I liked his take on Batman.
I
I'd say he's
did.
probably one of my favorite Batmans. Actually, I think he was pretty good.
I thought it was
Uh,
great. Yeah.
and I thought he had like this really unique take on Batman. He was this like emo Batman to
Yeah.
some extent, like
Yeah.
that like has a bunch of issues and is not good at being the Batman just yet. It kind of
Yes.
reminded me of like year one comics
Yes. Hmm.
when like Batman is still figuring stuff out and he
Hmm.
gets like punched in the face a lot.
Yeah.
and,
Yes.
and like outside of the suit, he is like this Bruce Wayne is different than any Bruce Wayne I've ever seen. In which like he's still like he's got issues
Yes.
and like he's still like he's not mentally in a good space
Yes.
and he's still trying to figure that out.
Yes.
I thought that
So
was really interesting.
I thought it was great. I would say that I have seen glimpses of this Bruce Wayne in other movies, but it's generally short lived. Like, even
Yeah.
in the Nolans, like there's this moment where Bruce Wayne doesn't want to be Bruce Wayne and he's sulking, and then Alfred
Mm.
snaps him out of it and tells, and then
Yeah.
before the end of the movie, Bruce Wayne rebuilds himself, or rather, Batman rebuilds Bruce Wayne for what Batman
Yeah.
needs, right?
Yeah.
And this wasn't the case in this movie, like
No.
throughout,
This
like
was this wasn't like Bruce Wayne is usually almost like the Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man. Like he's
yes,
this media frenzy millionaire that is always showing a public face. He's at these parties, the cocktail, like he's the playboy millionaire type. In this movie, that wasn't that Bruce Wayne at all,
yeah,
and I
I
found
agree.
that to be a very interesting take. That it was a refreshing, let's say, that take on the Batman. Like I said, I love the cinematography. I love the scenes. I know I know it's in the trailer, but I'm not gonna mention much about the villain just in case I spoil it. But I thought the villain acting was superb, probably the best. The one of the highlights of the movie
Agreed.
was
I
how
can't
how good the performance of the villain was.
Across the board. I would say the performances were stellar. Like, I can't
Hmm.
name one person whose performance was weak.
Yeah, true. I
There were
agree.
definitely
I
highlights.
guess that yeah that stood out to me as
Yeah,
a very interesting performance.
yeah. It was phenomenal. Like, honestly, I remember the backlash when Pattinson was announced to be the next Batman,
He's
and
great.
yeah,
I
he
want to see
was.
more of him.
Me too. Me too. This is the Batman. I agree with your first point. I can't think of another Batman I thought did a better job. I mean, yeah, it's probably my favorite, or at least in my top two, three
Yeah,
favorites. for sure.
Even the Batman voice he does is believable and nice. It's
Yeah,
not like Christian Bale was a bit cartoonish. So
he
I am
was.
Batman, like it's still a joke. Whereas like even the Batman voice is still like, yeah, okay, this is what I would imagine the Batman voice to sound like.
Yeah,
I'm into this.
yeah, it was phenomenal. I
I
really
do
enjoyed it.
think, though, however, like as a criticism of the movie,
Hmm.
I I uh, I, I thought it was too long.
Yeah.
And I think it's too long because and not because of the time I spent in the cinema. I'd gladly, we're all Lord of the Rings fans here, but um, but I think the movie kind of crumbled under its own weight.
Mm,
That there was so much story to tell,
mhm,
and even at the movie's long runtime, I
mhm,
don't feel it did their story justice.
mm.
It felt a little bit unfocused to me.
That's interesting. I didn't get the same impression of being unfocused. I did feel it ran too long near the end. Like
Mm,
my impression, and this might be very controversial, without spoiling it, um, I really felt like this could have been the Batman where the bad guy wins. It didn't need to have
hmm
a resolution that was like, you know what I mean? That part at the end where that doesn't happen. I think it was not badly acted or badly choreographed or anything like that. It was a really cool series of action scenes. I don't think they were necessary, especially for
mm,
the story that made it feel less grim dark, and I think it could have been more like it would have felt better to me if it was more grimdark, because that's the kind of story it was. I see this as the beginning of a not a trilogy exactly, but a series of movies with Pattinson, and it would have been
yeah,
okay for him to fail, learn from fail, come back stronger. So I
yeah,
don't think it needed the extra runtime in that regard.
yeah.
Yeah, but I mean that
Yeah,
that might have been a
that's an
very yeah,
interesting point of view. Yeah, but like I said, for me, I felt that yeah, I think there's been some plot lines that you could have removed and made the movie shorter and a lot more focused.
yeah,
And with the it's a shame that such a really well crafted world and imagery and cast would feel like, yeah, this is too long. I want it to end. Like it's a shame that you'd have to feel like that in the middle of a pretty good movie otherwise.
yeah. That makes sense.
Well, that's it. Still, like if you like Batman, it's still a movie worth checking out for sure.
Yes. And speaking of things worth checking out,
Oh,
we can move on to mail. How
what a
about that?
segue!
Thank you for calling it out, as is our
Uh,
tradition.
I have to call out the segue, of course.
So we have a few mail. We'll see which ones we have time to read. I'll start with this one. This one's a little bit heavy in terms of topic, but I think it's really important, so we should talk about it.
Yeah.
So we have an email from Victor, who says, "I'm a hobbyist game developer working on a small project on my own. Over
Mm,
the years, I've been getting more and more uneasy with playing and developing games that depict and have the player participate in military conflict. It
mm-hmm,
came to a very intense boiling point since I have to call my family in Odessa, Ukraine, every couple of days to see if they are all right, since a couple of weeks ago.
mm,
Even going so far as to scrap all combat from my project because the thought of it in my work made me kind of sick. While trying to find examples in released games and games making tutorials, I got the impression that armed conflict is normalized to such an extent in our medium that it's sometimes hard to imagine games without it. Did you ever meet a situation where the ubiquity of armed and military conflict in games felt off or felt constraining in some way? So that's the
Wow,
question.
what a question!
I know, heavy, huh? Yeah.
Very,
So I don't know
very.
if you want to go first or if you want me to go first.
You can go first, Osama. Let
So
me cook this
yeah,
one up a bit.
I felt this in a very real way when I first started my career. I worked at a company that made military shooters, and I was working on them. And I was a junior at the time, and I just barely got that job by the skin of my teeth. And even though like those games specifically, they villainized they misrepresented and villainized Arabs specifically, and Muslims more specifically as well. Like I should say, there was a lot of they blurred those themes, right? And it did not sit easy with me at all to have that happen. But it was I was junior, worried for my job, family to provide for, and working so long hours I didn't even have like the chance to apply elsewhere, if that makes sense. And eventually, with time, I was able to build up uh, courage to make some small changes so that like at least it didn't villainize real world. I like that's the problem with me. It wasn't necessarily that it was Arabs or Muslims. It was like a real world setting. So for me, that's my threshold. I know it sounds bad, but like shooting robots, even to a lesser extent, shooting aliens who are clearly villainous, it's not the same as having a game take place in a real world setting, and tell stories and take liberties and make those fun. Like I took a huge, uh, like a huge stance against 6 Days in Fallujah when it was announced last year, re-announced after it was canceled and brought back, because of that. It was a retelling of history, and for an event that happened not too long ago, where many of the victims are still like out and about, and um, like that's my line. I guess everyone has their own line, but that was my line that I just was super super unhappy about and uncomfortable with. Violence in general is kind of a part of life. It's not that I think it's okay, but like having games that have violence, like I just played Elden Ring and it has a lot of violence. That's not my line that I draw. Like you know what I mean, in the sand. um it's really when it's real world, when it's real world and you're starting to like that becomes indoctrination. That becomes like we have to be very careful of the messaging, and just it feels uneasy when you're taking real world conflicts, real world situations, and the goal is to make them fun, which is the goal of most games that we make, right? It's for fun. I don't know if you have a different point of view, Fauzi, but yeah, that's when I'm uneasy.
That's really well put, Osama. Depiction of violence or depiction of these kinds of actions has been part of the artistic, any kind of artistic representation, whether it's music or art or painting. And I don't think that video games should be exempt from that. Like there should be the ability to be able to portray different aspects of life within the different mediums that they have, for what they are, artistic or otherwise.
Like I don't think that even real world events should not exist in games. That's not even the point I'm trying to make. I'm just saying that games generally have an intention behind it. Most of the time when we're making commercial games, the intention is to make them fun,
Yeah,
less so than to make like like something culturally relevant, or to make to tell a story or something like that. That's the part that
yeah,
doesn't sit well with me. It's if we're making an art game, and the art game, the whole purpose of it was to make you feel from the point of view of someone in a real world event, and the game isn't about fun gameplay loops or reward
yeah.
mechanisms or something like that. That I mean, I might take offense to the specific message that's being given out, but not the point that it's taking place in a real world uh, setting, whether violent or not.
Yeah.
It's the marriage of like the violence, real world setting, and fun. Let's score points, and like that's the part that does not sit well with me at all. This is not
And
it.
I think this is where we should always have the conversation and like realize where that line is drawn. Like when
Yeah,
you play a game like Civilization, there is violence, so to say. Like there
yeah,
are armies that are marching on other armies, expanding
hmm,
territory, gathering resources, and all of that. And at
hmm,
the same time, Civilization has had a lot of positive
yeah,
impact in terms of like it helped a lot of people know more about history
yeah,
through the video game itself. So there's violence there, and like where that balance is something that we need to adjust. It's almost like the horror movie genre for its
hmm,
all. It basically glorifies gore to some extent. Um, but I don't think that that where the line is drawn, where it encourages violence, is a different thing than depicts it in a within the medium. there's always a line to be drawn, I think, but it's
Absolutely.
where the conversation needs to be constantly had.
100%. Like the level of abstraction in civilization and the topic, it's history. It's not something recent. Like those are things that lend it to. Like I'm totally okay with that. That and most people are as well. So definitely conversations and not just like black and white. This is okay. This is not. Victor,
Yeah.
I thank you for that question. I thought it was an excellent question, and more
Yeah.
so, I really hope that your family in Odessa is doing
Hope your
okay.
family is safe. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Hope your family is safe. I can't imagine what it's like to be in your shoes. I can
Must be
imagine
very
to some
difficult.
extent, in fact, but it
Yeah,
must be very difficult. I hope they're all safe.
absolutely. We can move on to another question.
Yes.
So this is a very different question. So what do we have? We have a question from Mustafa. He says, like many people, I've been playing lots of Wordle over the past little while. I also got sucked into the variants where you have to solve multiple Wordle boards with the same guess. There's Duwordle, 2 boards, or Quartle, 4 boards, and others that have you solving 8, 16, or even 32 boards at once. I'm finding that the 16 and 32 board variants feel easier than, say, the original or the 2 board variant. I was wondering if you had any game design thoughts as to on why that would be, and if I'm just an outlier and the difficulty does scale up as you add boards. So, and he says Ramadan Mubarak at the end. so,
Ramadan
do
Mubarak. This is all you, Osama. I don't play Wordle or any of these games, so I
well,
don't know how to answer that.
I could definitely jump in and answer that because I do play Wordle and I play Dwordle and Quordle. Although I haven't really played them in a little bit of a while. I lost one, my first one, after months of winning all of them, and I didn't really feel like continuing after. And since then, I've only popped in once in a while. And the thing is with Wordle, the way it works is that if you have a really good run, if you like write in a word and you get a lot of hits and you solve it, those are the ones that make you feel good, but not the ones you spend the most time on. The ones where you don't get a lot of letters and you're thinking and you're expending a lot of mental energy trying to figure out what the other letters are, those you spend more time on, and that does something to us psychologically, where overall you feel like Wordle is harder because uh, the time, the overall time is spent mostly on the hard ones than the easy ones, while with the other ones, the Wordle, Quordle, um, there are way fewer moments. You have a lot more guesses, but there are way fewer moments where you don't have anything to work with. The more boards you have, the whenever you put in letters, you're going to get more hits. And because you're going to get more hits, you're more actively trying to solve a puzzle that has pieces other than just trying to guess blindly, like with Wordle when it goes bad. In my point of view, I think that's why you get the impression overall that it's easier to do the ones with a lot of boards and the other ones because you just have more hits, right? You're constantly doing a thing. It's like a puzzle with a lot of pieces, and even though it takes you longer over time, you're actively noticing patterns. When you have puzzles with fewer pieces, um, if you get stuck on those, you're just stuck, and the time feels like it slows down. That said, like that's also one of the reasons that with Quordle or Dwordle it feels easier. It's because you're more actively doing good things, like connecting things together. So to me, it's mostly I think it feels more like an impression than fact. I would love to see the data to see if it backs it up, but I have pretty much the same win rate with Wordle, Dwordle, and Quordle. Like they're like I get I'm about as good in all of them. The Wordle, they tend to be more extreme. Like I either get it in like 2, 3 guesses, or like I by the skin of my teeth. With the others, they're more normalized because there's so many avenues that you could take. They tend to be more near the middle. But like I barely have any Dwordles or Quartles where I could guess them in 4, for example. Like that's never happened. They tend to be more normalized, but I think that's just the nature of having more options at a time that are floating around. Yeah, I'd be very curious to see the data behind it to see if that's actually the case or not. But a lot of it is just psychology, if that makes sense.
It's so funny for me when you say the names of these games, Quordle, Dordle. It almost feels like a joke.
Well, I mean, Dwardle 2, Quartle 4, like it's the Latin based thing.
Yeah, yeah, I get it.
If you abstract them, they sound ridiculous.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just the way you say them all in a row. It just sounds funny to me.
So yeah, I think that's it for today. We have more, emails, but I think we could wait until next week to bring them back. What do you think?
Sounds good, man. Yeah, sounds good. Let's put a doily on it.
Let's put a doily on it. All right, everyone. Thank you very much. Send us more emails. We're super happy to receive them. Come to our Discord. We have the friendliest people. We love you very much. And salam.
Salam.